There's men a lying, drawing lines black and white, making you believe it's your brother. You gotta fight, fight, fight. You got to know who your enemy is. The enemy, you know, you got to know who your enemy is. The enemy, you got to know who your enemy is.
So I'm gonna take you back for a little bit to get this all set up here. At 13 years old, I was too skinny to be a jock. I was too sort of poor to hang out with the rich kids. My dad drank too much, so I tried to stay away from the home. I found a bass guitar and I started playing, and I joined a band with my buddy Clark Hancock, and he invited me into the downtown St. John's scene, which I had never been a part of. And I went down with my skateboard and me and Clark, and I met all these punk rockers. And I was 13, and some of them were a little older at the time, and they were all just raving about the D.O.A. show. And, oh, you're just a couple months too late, Ken. You missed the biggest event in Newfoundland history. And this was, of course, Bob Armstrong and Craig Murray. And as kids back home in Newfoundland, they got the DIY punk ethic way before anybody else, and they taught the rest of us. And over the years, we collectively brought down SNFU, Deja Voodoo, a few other acts as well. But the DOA show that I missed still gets talked about to this day. Do you have any recollection of that Newfoundland show in 1984?
Well, the funny thing was getting there, right? Because we'd just gotten back from Europe, and we were at our roadie's place. It was out in suburban Toronto somewhere. Like, we had the van stored at his mother's place or something like that. And we're sitting around watching a hockey game or something like that. Yeah, we're Canadians, right? And then and I started looking at the map, and I said, we got to get fucking going. You know how far away this place is? You know, like, and we're used to distances, like traveling over Western Canada, all over the United States for like a long time at that point, right? You know, 84, I guess, right? So,
yeah.
6 years we've been doing this, and that was our first big trip to Europe, right? And So we started heading out there, and Dave Gray, our old guitar player, rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. Went like, holy Christ, you're right. So we got up at 6 in the morning and started driving. And of course, what we encountered was a gigantic snowstorm on the way, right? You know, being from Vancouver, I know snow, but it's not what we grew up with, right? And
Right.
And we got to the harbor in Sydney, and we went, holy crap, there's like icebergs everywhere, right? And then got in the ferry to go to the Rock, and went like, oh, okay, they mean business here, because they had to tie down the vehicle with these chains.
Mhm.
And I looked, they're bolting down the freight trucks, right? And we're going, okay, this is pretty serious. I won't go on too long about this, but we're on the deck, and you know, sitting in our seats, and there's this line on the wall and a chain with a ball.
Mhm.
And as the ship was listing either way, you know, the ball would get closer to the line. So Wimpy, he goes to one of the deckhands, what does that mean? And the guy goes like in the broadest accent, well, I'll tell you, boy, if that ball goes past the line, we're in the drink for sure. And we're going like, and there are people puking all over the place. The sea was so rough. Anyways, we got there, and it was an amazing experience, right? It's a beautiful town. I've only been a couple of times, and like it was jam-packed. I can't remember, we might have played really late or something like that, you know, but somehow we got there so late they postponed the show like by a couple hours. Instead of playing at 11, we played like 1 in the morning or something like that.
I'm not sure the details of the lateness, but I called my buddy Bob Armstrong, who was one of the kids who put together this show. And he told me the story, and he wasn't sure if you guys knew. He knew that he had been speaking with Ken Lester, doing all the coordination. And he knew that you had just arrived in Toronto from Europe on the 4th, and the show was on the 7th.
Right.
And on the day of the show, the Village in Pleasantville found out what was happening and canceled it. They said, we're not having 200 punk rockers in here. And they knew that you were on the ferry and you'd been through a snowstorm, and they didn't have a venue that morning of the show. And they struggled, and they ended up getting down to Oil Patch. They had to rent $200 for it, which was a lot of money back then for the kids. But it happened, and it became a part of this. Like growing up as a punk rocker in Newfoundland, it is part of our Newfoundland punk rock heritage. Is that first D.O.A. show that kind of sparked a scene, which grew, and people are still talking about it today. It's an amazing stamp you made.
I was there in St. John's like maybe 12, 15 years ago. And the article in the paper was, do you remember this show? It changed the Newfoundland music scene. That was the headline. So and we're going like, really? Oh, okay, whatever. It was cool.
It's amazing. Did you, in the early days of punk rock, there was a lot of this sort of kids being very involved in these DIY type of things, and it was the community that supported each other. We slept on each other's couches, we fed each other, we all toured around, we shared gear. Did something like that, what happened in Newfoundland, was that a regular part of your occurrence? Like out of every 10 shows, how many would be a show that was like that, sort of put together by amateurs?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we play like a bigger show, like we'd play with our buddies Dead Kennedys, or sometimes Black Flag, and it'd be like a big hall in San Francisco or LA. You know, you get like, we played some shows down there in the early days for like 5,000 people, which show up at an arena type thing. But say the first time we went to Reno, we got this is sort of the 7 second scene and all that, you know, like a pretty good little music scene for a small town. And we met some guys at a shopping mall we didn't really know, and then we started following them into the burbs. And of course, we're going to the manager, Ken, like, who booked this show? Where is this show? Type thing, right? And it was just like, we played in the garage, and it was I don't know, 80 people in the garage. So I had to play my guitar like this, so I didn't get my teeth taken out. I was like, you know, it was so jammed. And the same sort of thing too, like first time we went to Washington, D.C. So yeah, you're right. This is a similar experience. We got put on at a high school in Richmond, Virginia, across the river from D.C. And of course, like Ian Mackay, Henry Rollins, they're all like 16, 17 years old. And I go, oh yeah, this D.O.A. guys, I've heard of them, right? They're, kind of famous, or they're whatever, right? And we're going like, and we're saying thing, the band always saying to the manager, who the hell booked this type thing? One of the greatest shows ever. So it's just kind of like, you just got to kind of roll with it. And once in a while, you get a show that doesn't turn out. There's 20 people there. You kind of go like, okay, whatever. That's part of being a musician, right?
You play for the people that are there, the people that aren't there.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, they missed it. Yeah.
They missed it. Now, so I want to go back a little bit. In the 70s, you were sort of in a rock-inspired band you were called Stone Crazy at first. And that was sort of like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin stuff. And there was a time you had a couple shows where you did that, and you didn't really find that rock and roll was gelling with your musical voice. What brought it to suddenly? Because I know that next you talk about a lot about the Ramones' first album and how that kind of sort of painted the picture of what punk rock could be for you. What was it that sort of brought you from wanting to sort of play Zeppelin and Deep Purple to wanting to not play like the Ramones to play punk rock? Was it the youthful anger, rage at the world? Was it the sound? What made you wanted to do that?
Well, we got our first show, the Stone Crazy Band. We got 3 nights at a little town in BC called Merritt, which I call Merritt, BC. And the guy fired us after one night. The patrons were threatening to beat us up. We put a Black Sabbath song, and that was my turn for the lead. I didn't know lead very well at that point. And I just went to my Marshall and just rolled everything to 10 and then played the lead. And these guys are like lumberjacks. They're threatening to kill us, right? So the guy fired us. And then I got in an argument because I was like the guy who usually did negotiating with everything. Still am, like, sort of pseudo manager or whatever, right? And the guy went, hey, I'm doing you a favor by firing you because you get killed if you hang around here anymore. I go, oh yeah, you haven't heard the last of me, you bastard type thing, right? And I never got any dough out of him, right? But on the way back, we went, well, maybe this rock and roll is not all it's cut out to be, right? We'd done like 2 shows, like veterans, like so. And then Dimwit said, well, maybe we should start a punk rock band, and we'll call it Joey Shithead and the Marching Morons. And we went, well, that sounds pretty good. And we were like 18, 19. We didn't know jack, right? And so we did start a band called the Skulls.
Okay.
In August 1977 in Vancouver.
Yeah.
I played a few shows there. We moved to Toronto, played a few shows in Toronto, and then broke up type thing. But really, my political thing started way back when I was a kid. I was really interested. Like, I thought in high school, I thought, okay, I got to play defense for the Boston Bruins. It was my favorite team. I loved Bill Esposito, Jerry Cheevers, all that kind of thing. And then it turned out, well, I wasn't going to play defense for them for any team in the NHL. I was okay. The only thing I ever led in hockey at was like high sticking and fighting majors, right? But never goal scoring, right? Anyways, so then I thought I'd go to university to be a civil rights lawyer, right? Yeah. Fired by some stuff going on in the United States and anti-war protests and stuff like that. And I went to university for 6 months, and all of a sudden I was in a punk rock band, and I never became a lawyer. So all's well that ends well, right? So, but it was really the political expression of the time. The Cold War was building up between Russia and the United States, environmental degradation, racism, Vietnam War. These were all circumstances that fed into that, and I became very anti all of that, right? And trying to do something right for the world. That led me into politics. So when I heard about punk rock, like we saw the Damned on TV, who were a great band, but not really political. Yeah. And we saw the Pistols were making a huge impact. But we saw really a key one was the Clash, because they were like political. And, and they spoke about what was going on. We're like, wow, okay, this is what we thought rock should be. Like what we thought was the 70s before it became completely corporate.
Right. bands like Stiff Little Fingers, coming out of Ireland, lots of strife there. The Exploited, they raged against the UK and about Maggie Thatcher. Dead Kennedys had all of America to pick on, and including, going back from Reagan on the way through. The Clash had their own UK thing going, but they were also doing, on board with the USA. They were kind of projecting that way.
Yep.
D.O.A. as a Canadian band, like all those bands had stuff immediately regional happening. Whereas in Canada, it's just like, we have healthcare. Like, what did you have to rage about? And that was what I always found interesting about D.O.A. is you took on issues that other bands sort of had regional interests in. You did it on a global level. You went after everybody. You went after every politician in the world. You went after every sort of bad thing you can think of. I think that you have touched them in some way, but you haven't been a regional sort of, there's never been a singing out about Canada. Did you ever notice that, like being Canadian, like we didn't have that sort of, war-torn country that was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's good things about Canada that we have been involved in wars. I mean, obviously, but and I have a great deal of respect for veterans who put their life on the line, right? Of course. But it's just one of those things, like being so close to the United States and Vancouver. Like, I always feel like, what? I was 20 miles too far north and 2 years too young. Otherwise, I would have been the guy in Vietnam, with somebody trying to blow my head off, right?
Yeah.
And I was in high school. And it's like, I saw a lot of the Vietnam War on TV when I was like 10 years old. And it wasn't censored like the way war is on TV now.
Mm-hmm. It's
not quite censored, but it was like really graphic every night at 6:00, because my dad would get home from work, turn TV. He was like a news junkie just like me, right? So and so that, so it was horrific, and kind of one of those things. Greenpeace got us involved too, right? Because it started in Vancouver, and there was a protest in '72, and I guess I was in grade 10 or 11, and the Americans were testing nuclear arms in the Chicken Islands off Alaska. Mm-hmm. And Greenpeace organized all the kids from high school to go down and protest at the American Embassy downtown Vancouver. And I did that, really politicized me. And me and all my friends like Dimwit, Wimpy, Jerry Hanna, that we were in high school, like with our just horrible, terrible rock band that we had, right? Just like unlistenable type thing. But we got really interested in politics, right? And this was a big impetus, was this protest against arms testing. So I don't know, just kind of end up with like a kind of a global type view, I suppose.
It's amazing. I don't know any other artist that has done it, from a hardcore perspective, the way that you have, just taking on the whole world. I guess it's more of a human thing than a nationalistic thing, it seems like, with you, and that's really, really fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
But my gas is low and I got no home.
I live in a car. By day I push a shopping cart. I comb the alleys looking for cans. People laugh and cops harass. I think I've had about all I can stand. I wanna go home, but I can't, 'cause now I live in a car. I used to have a lot, I had a chance, but now I'm bleeding and scarred. I park by the Walmart every night, keep my eyes wide open for cars. But my gas is low and I got no home, 'cause now I live in a car. I live in a car. I live in a car. I live in a
Talk minus action equals zero. That's become sort of your slogan. It is the name of one of the albums. In your opinion, I've heard a lot of people speaking on it. You know, people from Billy Bragg recently at Folk Alliance talking about, you know, the artist's role as a changer in the world of creating political awareness and stuff. As an artist, do you feel it's your role to create art or affect minds? And when you're writing, are you making art, or are you thinking of, oh, I need to get a point out to people? And is that a conscious thing in your world?
It's conscious for sure. I think you do both, right? You know, like, put it this way, like all artists, musicians, you know, that's what we strive to do. Like, we all try to entertain people, try to write good songs, put on good shows. That's just what you try and do if you're going to be successful, or have even just have fun. You know, just you know, it was just a jam band in a rehearsal space with your high school buddies or whatever, right? But there's about 10% of us, I'm estimating, that think that you can use that as a force for good, right? And I really picked up on that early, right? And I think that's instrumental. That, you know, I look at people like Jimi Hendrix, one of my favorites, and Country Joe McDonald, not really known these days, but he was the anti-Vietnam War protester. You know, really did some great songs, and so people like that, I think, were, like, to me, were really inspiring when I was a kid, like in high school, that junior high type thing. And I really think you have a platform that you can go and do stuff, but here's your chance to speak to people, right? So I do write songs in a conscious way, but I also realize that you have to come up with stuff that's just like funny or odd too, because it's like, when I first listened to the Ramones and I heard like stuff like Beat on the Brat and No Daddy-O, I Don't Want to Go Down the Basement, I go, we listen to like, wow, these guys are really weird, but really interesting. Like, we're like 18, we heard these guys, right? And we're going like, wow. Oh, so I think you have to have fun too. So, you know, the D.O.A's goals were always like, okay, go out, play loud, obnoxious punk rock. That's rule number 1. 2, go change the world. 3, have a lot of fun while you're out there doing both, right? And those are the 3 rules that we still go by, right? You know, even though we're much, much older and the world's changed in the meantime. So I think you have to be conscious and try and write for a purpose. And some people are good at it. Some people are just learning it, but I never think that you shouldn't try it. Just some people don't. I mean, you listen to some forms of music and it's just like, oh my God, this, like, it can be massively successful, but I just listen to it like, the first thing I want to do is reach for like a barf bag, right? This is like, I'm not going to name names, but there's some terrible music out there, right? That is skillfully done and sold way more than I'll ever sell, but whatever, right? You know, that doesn't mean I have to like it, because I don't. Yeah.
I have a lot of respect, and I understand exactly what you're talking about there. Yeah, no, there's you know, it's the McDonald's syndrome. You know, you want to eat some of the best food in the world. You're going to go to a little restaurant that seats 20 people a night with a chef who cooks 1 meal a night, and it's perfect. And then you've got McDonald's, which has sold how many billions of people this year. It's music can be like that too. It's a consumer-based world, and you know, there's room for everything, I think. You know, I know what I like to have on my plate, and it's, you know, it's well, it is what it is.
that was the thing when I first heard punk rock. We went, wow. Dimwit brought home the first Ramones album. We put it on, and as I just said, that like, wow, this is really strange. All the songs sound the same. They have really odd lyrics. It doesn't sound like Led Zeppelin. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like whatever the, the popular band of the day was type thing, right? And disco was popular, like when we were at that stage too.
That's right.
Yeah, but it just went like, okay. And then the funny thing was the Ramones came to town. This was like 1978, like June maybe.
Mhm.
They put Commodore Ballroom, about 1,200 people.
Yep.
And they had sold two tickets. And so they put on the radio, like a big rock station, come on down, see the Ramones for free. And the guy, Drew Burns, who later became friends, he ran the Commodore. It's like, okay, we gotta get some people in here, like buying booze and make some money, get some of our money back. So about 100 of us showed up at this free show for the Ramones. 2 people had paid.
Wow.
And the Lute from Seattle came on, who were really good, became friends with them later. And then the Ramones went on, played the first album, start to finish. The whole show was maybe 38 minutes or something like that. They walked off stage, did one song encore, and we all, with the 100 of us from Vancouver, went like, okay, that's what punk rock is.
Yeah.
That. And we'd see it on TV, and Sex Pistols in Riot, Yobs beat up Johnny Rotten or whatever, right? Whatever was going on, that sensationalized punk rock. But when we saw the Ramones play, we went like, got it. So luckily I was able to play 6 shows with them, became friends with them, and it's like, sadly they're all gone, obviously, right? But they wrote the textbook on that, right? Like how you play, how you jam the songs here, how you write songs, right? It was just like, yeah. And there's lots of other good bands, but to me, they're A1.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely, they created a sound that sort of hadn't existed before. They're a band that do that every now and again. And they were one of them. I had a very similar experience a couple of years after D.O.A. were in St. John's. We brought SNFU down.
Oh, cool.
We had the same thing happen. The venue got found out what was happening. They canceled us. We ended off in an abandoned apartment that a friend of a friend's parents owned.
Yeah.
We jammed like 100 people into this like living room, kitchen, dining room of this apartment, and brought in a PA. But there was no way to separate the band from the kids. So myself and Mike Bueller and Clark Hancock and Danny Thomas and Chris Jarrett, we all sort of formed a human wall in front of the band, and we locked arms. So like Chai was like 2 feet in front of me, and Muck was playing bass. He had that big Ampeg. I'd never heard an Ampeg before. And as a young bass player, for the 60 minutes they played, it was the most eye-opening experience I'd ever had in life. And that was what drove me to, that was the drug that has fueled me now for 35 years of playing music. It was listening to that Ampeg SVT, like right in my face for 60 minutes. I'd never heard anything like it.
And great band too, right? Yeah.
Oh, Chai was on top of his game. He had the dreads going and he was spinning and jumping off the ceiling. It was unbelievable, but it was that moment where I saw it. It was like, this is how it's done. It's amazing, that aha moment. And I think at hardcore too, because it's something that you can listen to the records, but to feel the energy of the room and the people and the passion of the culture and the support that everybody has is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's that energy that you got, and it's the same thing with the early records too, right? Why people go, this early era of punk rock, from 77 to 85, let's say. And there are lots of good records made after that. I'm not like, I only like this, so I like all sorts of things. But and the people from the rock crowd go, well, listen how poorly produced this is. But when you put those records on, you put on old Black Flag record or like Minor Threat, it's the energy that was contained in the studio. Yeah, sure, there's some rough edges. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's way more crazy than what rock and roll was producing at the time. And that's what drew me into it. And it was just like, wow, okay. And it was like punk rock, great thing about it is that freedom of expression.
And it's very open. I love how
there's no rules to it, right?
Exactly. And the culture is embraced, in the years, the 30 odd years that I've kind of, had my head tuned into the punk rock scene. it's open. You know, I've seen reggae and hip hop and metal and country. I've seen every genre of music infuse with punk rock at some shape or form, and it's always highly supported. It's amazing. It's a great culture.
Yeah. It kind of kills me when I see the modern country people. They put on a cowboy hat and they wear a Ramones shirt. I'm like, oh dear. Whatever. It's a free society. You can wear whatever you want. I'm not saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's funny. The Ramones, for some reason, that Ramones logo shirt, it has made it into like every piece of fashion.
Yeah,
it's so much.
So yeah.
I mean, there are the bands, you know, the Dead Kennedys, you know, D.O.A. Of course, you have your logo that has been around for years, and even Black Flag. I mean, one of the most immediately recognizable things. But somehow that Ramones crest just made it like it.
Having the baseball bats crossed at the bottom, it's just like, okay, that is brilliance, right?
it's just amazing how they did that. They really sort of infiltrated every aspect of culture. It's fantastic. Yeah. So you mentioned that you were you had thought about going to school for a civil rights lawyer, and you became a punk rocker. You played punk rock your whole life. You've built a label, Sudden Death Records. Now, when I think punk rock, you know, I mean, you think back to SST Records and Alternative Tentacles and all these things, and it seems like 2 or 3, you know, sort of teenagers living in a house, you know, pressing their own CDs and stuffing out the mailers and sending them all out. Do you have a corporate office? Do you have people working for you? Is there an actual physical location where this stuff gets distributed through, or is it all coming out of your house? Like Sudden Death Records is a massive business, correct?
Well, I don't know about massive, but we put out like 140 releases over the last 20 years or so.
That's big.
And you know, it's going well. Basically, I'm kind of the guy. I'm the president, the shipper, the phone guy. So it's kind of like it was pretty funny. Like maybe 25 years ago, I phoned up my friend Fat Mike and I said, "Well, D.O.A's run through a few labels. How about getting on your label?" And he went, "Joe, you're stupid. You'll do way better if you start your own label. Look what I did, right?" And I went, "Oh, okay." And I had like when D.O.A first did the first like 5 singles, like Disco Sucks, World War III, a couple other ones, Burn It Down. We did on Sudden Death Records, and it was just kind of like one of those things. Like we pressed it, and same thing. We sat around the front room, had a few beers, and put the vinyl in the sleeves and stuff like that. You can see it was so fresh that you get fingerprints and thumbprints on it because we didn't wait to dry. And it's like whatever. We're so excited. And then I would take him in my old beat up car, which barely ran. I took him to 5 different record stores in Vancouver and sold them for $1. And then they would sell them for $1.25. And I thought, well, they cost me 80 cents. I'm making 20 cents a record. This is going pretty good, right? You know, so it. But the funny thing was that's how D.O.A got going, because I would take envelopes, no padding, no reinforcement. I put a Disco Sucks single in. What I used to do is go to a record store and with a notebook, and I'd write down the addresses of like magazines, clubs, like in the back of like Kerrang or something like that. You saw listings, and I didn't have money to buy the magazines, right? And I didn't have money for long distance calls, so I put this envelope, Disco Sucks single. It's like, "Hi, we're a punk rock band from Vancouver. We'd like to come and play in your town. If that's okay, please write me back here." And I mailed out like 200 or 300 or 400 of these things, right? And it's just like, and then we mailed one to a record station in San Francisco, College Station. And about 3 weeks later, we got back this letter. It said D.O.A is #1 on the station. And of course, we didn't know that college stations were small compared to like some giant rock station.
Right.
And we thought, we looked at this and we're like, me, Chuck, and Brandon were like, "Whoa, we made it." Like I said, we didn't know jack, right? Like we just learned everything on the fly. But we went down there and played the Mabuhay Gardens, which is like basically the equivalent to the 100 Club or CBGB's for San Francisco. Yeah, like the legendary club. And made friends with the Avengers, made friends with the Dead Kennedys. And Be outrageous, and all of a sudden we had a home away from home, and we started going to California like 6 times a year. Somebody say, "Hey, you want to come down next week? Play with Black Flag, play with Red Cross." Yep, okay, we'll see you in 5 days, and we just drive down there, right? And it was that kind of scene. So it was basically, yeah, it's my home away from home down there.
So let me ask you a question here.
Sure.
I've spent a lot of time touring myself all over. I've done empty clubs in northern Russia to the Air Canada Center in Toronto. I've been all over. I loved it. A lot of my travel, I was playing with rock bands. We were on, sort of Canadian labels, and we had some funding, not a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember sort of during the 90s and 2000s touring with all the Canadian bands. Everybody from 5440 and the Headstones, Tea Party, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what I grew up with. And I knew those people, and we'd meet at the hotels, at 3:00 in the morning when you're checking into your hotel, or you're parking your tour bus so your driver can have or the van so that a driver can go and get a shower and stuff. You'd cross paths with the other musicians who were touring, and you'd, see each other at the gas stations and all that. And when you had time, you'd go to check out a show and stuff. But it wasn't the same sort of camaraderie that I imagine, like in that period of, sort of 77 to 85, where the punk bands were like, you were all kind of living with each other, helping each other out. Yeah. Like that was where you got your next meal from, was, the next band that you were going to play with the next night you were hanging out with. Can you give me some perspective on what that was like to be living that life at a time when there was, D.O.A, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys? I could list for an hour, but you know what I mean? Yeah. You were hanging out with these people that are worldwide icons in a scene, just as you are. But as kids, did you know what was happening? Did you have any idea how important it was? Or was it just a great time?
No, just it was a funny thing the way it built up. You're quite right that we didn't think about it too much. Right? We knew it was getting more popular and stuff like that, right? And Dead Kennedys took off, and of course, Ramones were big, Clash, Pistols broke up, whatever, but they sold a bunch of records, that kind of thing. But the next class down, like the D.O.A, the Minor Threat, Black Flag, where didn't achieve the success right away. I mean, later on, obviously type thing did. We just would exchange notes. So what I found, I have good friends with the Black Flag guys, especially one guy in particular, Chuck Chakowski, bass player, and because he would do the same thing as me, sort of try and manage the next show and like make sure everybody got there. So me and him would exchange information, like, okay, well, don't play there. That guy will rip you off. Okay, or you play here, that guy will give you $50 and a crappy place to sleep on the floor, right? But better than nothing, whatever, right? And so when it came, so the Dead Kennedys, I say, were big, so they would fly in and play a big show and then fly home. But Black Flag and D.O.A drove around, right? So we would go, for a lot of people, like say in Europe and especially, and all over North America, especially, the first band, the punk rock band they saw was D.O.A and or Black Flag. And you could tell, so the next time you go to that town, you could tell who had got there first, because the support band, and Black Flag had been there first, the support band sounded kind of like Black Flag, or the support band sounded kind of like D.O.A. They were like, right. Oh yeah, we saw these guys. That's how you do, and it just kind of wrote this map, and it's just exchanged all this information, like, and just like, and but I never did think that, okay, this is like, this is legendary or whatever type thing. We didn't really have a thought about that. Like, it's just, let's just get it done. Let's be adventurous and make the best of it, right?
Wow. Yeah. And you did, what was it? You're into like 20 albums plus a couple live albums, a bunch of compilations, your new solo record. Yep. And over the course of the years, am I correct? You've had 28 musicians in D.O.A?
I just went through that the other day. A journalist friend of mine, 27, I think. I got the list here somewhere. I was just looking at this morning. I think there's like 25 different lineups. Yeah. Now, some people say I'm hard to get along with. So if they say that, then usually I'm joking, right?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like people change, right? But one of the things that a real key element to D.O.A. was the camaraderie. As people change, go like, okay, like Chuck at one point. Chuck was great, like fantastic drummer, what a talented guy, and good songwriter too. And at one point, he just had enough, and he went, I quit, and they joined Black Flag. They joined Circle Jerks, Social Distortion, Danzig, right, legendary drummer. But it's just like, he wasn't having fun at it anymore. So it's just like, 4 years to hang around with me and Randy was enough, I guess, right? And people change, like one thing I never really put up is when people got too wasted. You can't try and steer them in the right direction. But, you can't play shows when you're wasted, or you'd start to develop a drug habit.
Yeah.
That like, that's when your friends need to help you try and straighten out. Because we've all lost too many friends from this BS. It's like, and it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. Right now, we've seen with the opioid crisis, is like, what happened is just nothing compared to what's happening now, right? So,
yeah, that's what it's. I keep talking to all the young musicians, all the sort of 19 to 25-year-olds that I talk to, and every now and again they're like, "Do you got anything you can pass on to me?" And I'm like, "Stay away from the hard drugs, like." Even booze and weed, like, just be aware. It can really lead you. It can take away everything you've ever wanted, and it's
and wreck your life and wreck your family, all that kind of thing, right? So, and a lot of people, like, you see some real inspirational people in music, they didn't make it to 30 years old, right? It's just like it got the better of them. So that would be my advice too. Just don't do drugs. This is not, and booze isn't that great either, but.
I wanted to say congratulations on the Vancouver meltdown that's happening May 11th.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
Is that going to be, how did that all come together?
Well, we've been playing, there's a great place in Vancouver called the Rickshaw, which is like in the middle of the roughest area of the downtown east side, roughest area in Canada, which is basically kind of where I grew up and learned how to play music and all the clubs, right? It was like our stomping grounds. So what we played there, like, 6 times in the last 8 years. So time for a change. So back to the Commodore, which is like kind of the greatest ballroom in Canada type thing, or close to it anyways, right? So it's great to be back there, and good friends with John Wright from X No Means No, now Dead Bob, his new band, and Ford is in that band. He used to play guitar in D.O.A, so it was like a natural fit, right? So we think it's going to be a great show, May 11th, and we have a whole bunch of shows coming up, 4 different kind of 2-week mini tours this year.
Okay.
And working on, I've got almost all the songs written for a new album. So we'll record that in the summer. So they'll be out February next year. And there's a documentary that's coming out called Something Better Change.
Yeah.
That's pretty well complete. So we think that should be, being entered in film festivals. So we think that should be available to air by about mid this year or September at the latest, right? So, and it's half about D.O.A and then half about me and activism and getting into politics. Yeah,
I didn't. That was where I was going to go next, but there's lots of information out there about you and your municipal councillor for the town of Burnaby, right?
Yeah, I'm in my 2nd term, so I got reelected, so I must be doing something right.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. It's
people want what's happening with me or D.O.A, just go to suddendeath.com.
Again, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't say what a thrill it is to talk to you in person and just tell you how much of an impact you've had on me. And thank God D.O.A have existed.
Yeah, and we're not going to Newfoundland, but let your friends out there in the Maritimes know we'll be out there doing a bunch of shows around Canada Day.
Oh, excellent.
Could be in Ontario mid-September, like playing Toronto, Montreal, etc., Southern Ontario, right? So
okay, well, me and Cam Carpenter will come out and see you when you're in Toronto.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You have yourself a great day.
Okay, you too. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.